Oh boy, hold on to yourself, your seatbelt, and your hot air balloon, because we're going to fly right now over a big subject, part 2, with the Birch Gold consultant that I'm working with, Phillip Patrick. I heard him in an interview with Steve Cortez and Steve Bannon on the War Room, and I said, dang, that guy's fascinating. And he was discussing how America is getting itself further and further into a perfect storm economically, and he explains it. Some people have a gift to explain and simplify the complex, and Phillip does that. What he said in part 1, and I don't want you guys to miss, is the problem we have now is that you've got the money has flooded into the zone, because that's how politicians in Washington get votes and create disasters that kick the can down the road. They just flood the market with money, money, money. Now that money's got to move around and go somewhere. Well, what happens if the dollar stops being the global reserve currency? We can't put trillions of dollars of pumped out money into the world and have it absorb it. What if that money starts coming back? Ay vey. This is like your end time scenario you don't want to see, where inflation is up, the dollars are coming home, and we're in stagflation, where businesses are closing down and there's no new work. Basically, it's produced bubbles. Bubbles is what he's talked about in the first episode. A housing bubble, a market bubble, a stock bubble. Whiskey, you can buy whiskeys over here. The bottled whiskey market is a bubble. And then women's pocketbooks, Rolex, or different watches. That's all artificially inflated. It's like Jiffy Pop. Boom, 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 boom. So it pops. And it's all because of money going there, but it's not producing any real new goods and services. It's just beefing up the ones that are already there. As it comes down, you deal with the stock market, boom, like that. The housing market, kaboom, like that. Then you look at the dollar being devalued. The dollar losing its value while inflation is going up. He's described that clearly in part 1. We'll hit it again, part 2, and then we're going to talk about the solution. Don't want to miss it. I want you to meet Phillip Patrick and the expert I work with at Birch Gold to explain what it is that they're doing that makes them one of the top companies in their profession, helping individuals like you and me navigate through the storm. You can only affect so much at a macro level. You got votes and prayers and your own personal obedience. That's what affects the macro. The micro is where we're going to go now, what you can do. We'll go right into the episode. So where do we go? Now, why is we come back to this? It's not the solution to the national problem, but it might be a solution for people storing value somehow in something. It's like when my battery is going out, I have to charge my battery. I want to store that money. The dollar has to go somewhere. Talk to me about why you guys are doing what you're doing.
Yeah, of course. So first of all, what you said a moment ago, I think is important, right? Where we get caught up a lot in the big picture stuff, and it is frightening, right? Watching a president making such poor decisions on behalf of the country is frightening. But sometimes we can get stuck with that, right? And we're limited in how much we can control that big picture stuff, right? We can go and vote in November, we can vote in 2024 and hope to get someone who represents our interests, someone with some sanity in the White House. But that's what we can do. So in my mind, we have to scale it down. We have to look at those around us and say, okay, how can we protect ourselves? Now, you mentioned something at the beginning, information. Information is the most important thing, because it requires understanding the nature of our problems, because when you do, solutions start to present themselves. So we deal at Birch with precious metals. Now, precious metals are not suitable for every climate, right? When the economy's booming, when the markets are booming, these are safe haven assets, right? You don't really want to be in safe haven assets when everything's doing well, right? In those climates, people jump heavily into the stock market, and the stock market reflects a booming economy. But the reverse is also true. Now, if I were to look at our issues today, in understanding what they are, I also understand how conducive gold and silver are for them. So just to break it down, listing the big economic issues, I think bubbles in the markets, in particular the stock market, but I think housing. I think inflation is obviously a massive one, and currency or dollar devaluation. I think economically speaking, these are the big issues of the day. Well, these problems, they're a massive issue for anyone holding stocks and bonds. These same problems, though, are positive drivers for safe haven commodities, and in particular, gold and silver. So, to break it down, when we see sharp corrections in the market, stock market crashes, gold and silver tend to increase on the back of an increase in safe haven demand. Look at 2008. It's a very good example. Stocks dropped at the high point 50%. Gold and silver doubled within 18 months of that. When inflation rises, everyone knows what that means. It's when things become more expensive over time. The technical definition of inflation, though, is the rising cost of commodities and services over time. Gold and silver are literally commodities. So by literal definition, as the cost of living has increased, as a minimum, they move proportionally. Then you look at the currency side, dollar devaluation. Well, it's actually gold specifically and the US dollar that hold an inverse relationship. And that means when the dollar goes down, gold goes up by proxy. Now, I think to understand that well is to understand a lot about gold. See, gold's buying power doesn't change. Gold is a store of value, and it always has been. The example I always give is this. In biblical times, an ounce of gold bought somebody 400 loaves of bread. Today, $5 a loaf, 400 loaves of bread. Gold's value isn't changing. What's changing, and it changes every day, is the dollar's value. Well, then it becomes simple. If gold is staying the same, but the dollar is weakening, we need more weaker dollars to buy that ounce, hence that inverse relationship. So as tough as the climate is, it's very conducive for growth in safe haven commodities, and in particular gold and silver. The other side of it, just very briefly, is the lack of options. Stocks have historically been a very good hedge on inflation, but they're not today. They're dropping in value, and what we've seen in terms of downside appears to be the tip of the iceberg. Then you look at cash and bonds. In every other crash in our lifetime, we could sit it out in cash and just wait for opportunity. Nonsensical to do it today, right? A government treasury is paying 2.8%. Inflation, according to the government, is 8.6%. And they're lying. They're not including a lot of food and energy. If you use the same metric they did to calculate inflation in the 80s, it's 16% today. So sitting in cash doesn't work. So I think we're suffering from a lack of options, and we're in a climate that's very conducive for safe haven commodities. And I think both of those things make them very appropriate for this climate.
Yeah. So I want to ask a question here. So then what type of solutions does Birch offer? Because when we're talking gold and silver, some people might not have any idea, what am I getting, a bar of gold? What am I going to get here
certificate
if I purchase? And so I think there's a lot, we have all sorts of different types of listeners.
By the way, I've got some friends of mine who are wealthy guys that can do what I can't do. But they refuse to trust anything but the actual metal. They're buying gold and silver, and then they're hiding it. I mean, literally, that's what the eccentric wealthy do. They're literally boxes of coins.
Yeah.
And it's like, and they're saying, look, if I can't bite it, how do I know it actually exists?
Yeah. Well, so my question is just so we're all on the same page. I mean, we have people that, lived on fixed income that are listening to us. And then we have people that, are in retirement and they have, a couple $100,000 in an IRA. And so I'd love if you could just run through a couple different solutions, cross that gamut. I think it would really help people a lot.
Of course. So first of all, don't recommend biting gold. It's not smart. It can hurt. But look, the reason that they prefer physical to paper, I think, is because of the leverage, right? A lot of paper assets, they're leveraged. If they've got an ounce of gold in a vault, they're selling 30 to 100 ounces. On top of that, when you own physical gold, it is a currency itself, right? So you're not sitting in dollars. So there's a lot of reasons to be focusing on the physical. I think they're absolutely right. Now, we deal, that being said, only with physical precious metals here at Birch. We don't deal with exchange-traded funds or mining stocks. That is by design. Now, a couple of different ways we can help. So for somebody sitting there, they've got some cash in a bank account, it's losing to inflation, you can purchase physical precious metals. And you have the option either for Birch to store it on your behalf within, let's say, a Brinks facility, or most people who are buying in cash do like to take physical possession. We can ship the metals to them, they can hold on to them. If you ever want to sell them back, we would always like first right of refusal to buy them back. So that's the cash purchase. As you mentioned, there are a lot of people with most of their retirement sitting in IRAs, retirement accounts. The IRS allow for us to roll over any portion of any IRA or qualifying 401k. There are no tax implications. There are no penalties, because essentially we move it from an IRA to another. So it's a lateral move, and we can facilitate physical precious metals tax deferred within a retirement account. In terms of the types of metals, we have everything available. We are now, one of the largest brokerage companies that do what we do here in the United States. So we have everything available from coin to bar, different types of coin, types of bar. And there are a lot of people like myself at Birch that are there to help your listeners through the process, explain everything, facilitate, and to make decisions.
Wow. So this is what we're doing. I mean, I've done it. And so you can see why, because I really think that Phillip Patrick, he makes sense. He's like an advisor in the best sense.
And that's what's great about Birch too. So I just want to throw this out there that if you go to lancewallnau.com/Birch, there's a 21-page report there that you can download. It goes through in depth a lot of the things that Phillip was talking about. And what's so great is that Birch will call you and talk about all of these different options that might be right for you. And I think it's accessible for a lot of people. I mean, one of the things too, maybe you could talk about is the difference between why somebody might buy gold or silver. And because we're all looking for a hedge against this inflation that's coming. And so silver is a little more accessible, probably for somebody like me versus Lance over there is probably buying, bars of gold. No, I'm just playing.
Like Goldfinger, like James Bond with the brick.
Yeah. But so I think maybe talk about the significance of gold and silver, why somebody might make a different purchase.
Of course. So that, by the way, a great question. By the way, at Birch, gold, silver, platinum, and palladium are all options. However, I think you're absolutely right to focus on gold and silver. They're the safe haven assets. Platinum and palladium, they're true industrial metals. So oftentimes in periods of market decline, they can struggle. So I think to focus on gold and silver, you're right. We have to understand that they're both good. They're just different. So what I would say, gold is the more defensive of the two. As we mentioned before, it's really geared towards preservation of wealth and buying power, more so than it is aggressive growth. So for somebody who's shorter term, who's very defensive, maybe they say, look, I've got this little bit of money. I just want to preserve what I have. I probably need access to it in the next few years. For me, that's somebody who might want to be more defensive and potentially heavier in gold. Now, silver, very attractive, but for different reasons. Silver's heavily undervalued, okay? So gold and silver, historically, they've traded at 16 to 1. And that means usually gold's 16 times the price of silver. Today, they're 80 to 1. So silver's really cheap relative to gold, but it's different, right? Gold and silver are both safe haven, but silver's a hybrid. It's used a lot in industry. Solar technology requires it. Electric cars require it. What we've been seeing there is very positive. We're seeing industrial demand growing aggressively for silver and supply shrinking. So for me, it's a really interesting growth play, right? Cheap prices, rising demand, shrinking supply, it bodes well. Where I have a word of warning is I would think to realize the full potential, it could be a slightly longer term hold than gold. And I say that for this reason. I think both of them could do very well short to medium term on the back of their safe haven properties and all of the tough stuff in the economy. But once we start to pull out of this mess, we see the economy pick up, we see industrial consumption increase, that could be the climate where silver starts to bridge the gap. So somebody who's looking longer term, more aggressively at growth, they may want to move more heavily towards silver. So I see value in both of them. It just depends on the strategy that you're looking to employ.
You know, what about people? This is kind of interesting because we have a lot of like different types of like preppers in our audience too. I've heard other ideas thrown out about the use of silver. Is that because it's like in a coin size that if the dollar collapses, we're all going to be trading in silver or bullets or toilet paper rolls? I'm not really sure.
It's the Kiyosaki plan.
Yeah, the Kiyosaki plan. So, I mean, what do you think? What do you think about something like that?
Look, preppers, and we speak to them as well, and who am I to say someone's wrong or right? I'll give you my perspective on that. But preppers tend to like either small denominated silver. The benefit of silver is, little 1 ounce things like $25 versus that in gold is almost $2,000. So if you're looking for something as a medium of exchange, they tend to like silver, or there are a lot of products in gold that are geared for that. I'll give you an example. There's something called a Valcambi bar. It's like a credit card, like that. And it's made out of gold and it's perforated into 51-gram sections. So people can break them off, right, and use little 1-gram sections. So there are products designed for that sort of mindset, whether it's gold or silver. Now, do I personally feel that within a few years we're going to be bartering and trading gold and silver in the street? I don't personally. I think even if we see this major collapse of currency, I think the solution would be to that extreme sort of hypothetical, a new currency, as opposed to trading, things for things. But here's why I really like it. I've got gold in my safe, right? And I do it because in the back of my mind, I think, well, if things got really bad, then fine. But here's the thing. Even if they don't, even if we just see high levels of inflation, that stuff's going to go up, right? And I can sell it back for more dollars. Even if, the middle ground, things collapse, gold and silver go up. So my point is it suits many different eventualities. It's not like me putting all of my retirement into tin tuna. If this never happens, I've got more tuna than I'm ever going to want to eat. It's not the same. So I have no problem with it, because if we don't use it for that, we'll just use it, sell out, hopefully at a higher level, and have hedged inflation. So it suits many different eventualities.
And just to be clear, you're not recommending tin tuna to any of my audience. So I'll have somebody that'll ask me that they weren't paying attention. They'll say, Lance,
I put it all in tin tuna. Listen, if Biden keeps driving inflation up, that might be a good investment.
Might be the answer. Phillip, thank you so much for being with us. Just an incredible interview. We're looking forward to talking to you again in the future. Now, for folks that want to follow up on this, it's going to be lancewallnau.com/Birch. That's where you go. You get the 21-page report. Listen, man, you can have access to Phillip and people like him that'll talk to you and walk you through the questions you've got. lancewallnau.com/Birch. What you don't want to do is procrastinate. Now is the time to act.
Thanks for listening to this Lance Wallnau broadcast. If you enjoyed today's show, make sure to subscribe and